heard an inspiring story today about an Indiana woman who walked into a Kmart and started handing out $50 bills and paying for the gifts of random poor people. One grateful father literally bursting into tears. Now, charity is one of the great things this nation is known for, and we make it easier for folks to contribute by offering deductions for contributions and by keeping tax rates as low as possible. But the president wants to cut back on those charitable deductions, suggesting that the government's projects deserve more money than private charities do. He also wants to hike taxes on the rich, who account for a huge amount of giving. Well, with us now is a very wealthy man who is also very charitable, but he thinks he should actually be paying more taxes. Joining us now is attorney and patriotic millionaire Guy Saperstein. Guy, first of all, thank you for all of the charitable work you do. You've done a lot of it in your life, and it's helped a lot of people. But why cut back on those deductions that help people to be more charitable?
David, this is a very heartwarming story of this woman, and I wish we knew who she was, so we could thank her directly and honor her. But charity cannot take the place of government services or even social services. All the rich people in America combined account for about 3% of what government spends. And the other thing about charity, which should be noted, is that most rich people's priorities are much different than the average Americans. Rich people primarily give money to museums and opera houses and symphonies and private universities, and that's different than the priorities of average Americans who need police services and fire departments and health care and unemployment insurance, Social Security. Charity just can't do the work of government.
But if I'm giving my money to a charity, I'm gonna follow that money pretty carefully. First of all, I'm going to choose a charity because there are thousands to choose from. So there's one screening process. And then when I give the money, if it's a sizable chunk, I want to follow and make sure they do the right thing. When I give my money to the government, I don't know what the hell happens to it. I mean, it goes out to 50 different agencies. Each one have hundreds of different bureaucrats, and Lord knows how many middlemen there are between me and the person that's trying to help.
Well, I agree with you that one of the joys of charity is being involved and being able to monitor the money and so forth, and it's much harder to do that.
So why do anything to discourage that process by reducing the amount I can deduct on charitable contributions?
Well, I'm not suggesting that the charitable deduction should be reduced or eliminated.
Because President Obama, I thought you were agreeing with him on that, but you're not.
No, we think that tax rates on rich people should be increased. Tax rates today in America are the lowest they've been in 60 years, and rich people can afford to pay more. Back in the 50s, under Republican President Eisenhower, marginal federal tax rates were 90%. Under Kennedy, they were 70%. Under Nixon, they were 60%. They were even higher under Reagan.
Right, but nobody paid them under Eisenhower, and nobody paid it. Well, they weren't higher under Reagan. He lowered them to 25%, the top rate in 1986. So they were quite a bit further down.
And then he raised taxes 8 times.
Yeah, no. What he did is what the Simpson-Bowles Committee wants to do, which is to reduce rates and get rid of reductions. Yes, more income came into the government, but he lowered rates, not raised rates.
Federal tax rates today are the lowest they have been in 60 years.
No, I'm sorry, but I can't let that pass. It's not true. He lowered the tax rates in 1986 down to a top rate of 25%. They are now, about 36.5%. So they were lower under Reagan than they are now.
Let's get back to your main point about charitable deductions. If you really wanted to increase charitable contributions, what you would do is raise federal tax rates, because that would incentivize rich people to give more money away. When you had to back in the 50s and 60s, when people were paying 70 to 90% marginal tax rates, that was only costing them between 10 and 30% to do that. So they were incentivized to give money away.
Well, they were also incentivized to hide so much of their money that there wasn't the spurt of economic activity until JFK lowered tax rates in the 1960s.
The 50s were a very good decade, a very prosperous decade. We can thank Republican Eisenhower for that. The 60s were prosperous. The 70s were relatively prosperous. It's nothing. Haven't seen anything like
70s.
Those. The 70s were relatively. I mean, we had inflation. We had big inflation.
We had inflation. We had low growth. We had high interest rates. We had a mess until Ronald Reagan lowered the tax rates significantly, and we had a burst of 20 million jobs in the 1980s from 1983 until 1990, one of the biggest growth periods in history.
The biggest growth period in jobs was under Clinton. 23 million jobs were created. Reagan's legacy is not anywhere even close to that.
That was after he lowered the capital gains tax rate. That had a lot to do with it. But the fact is, let's just leave on a note of agreement. You are not for lowering. You are not for lowering the deductions that people get for charitable contributions. Correct?
Correct.
All right, Guy. Listen, thank you so much. And again, thanks for the great work you do, particularly during this holiday season. We appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for the kind words.